It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Hi, it's Feedback Friday. And I don't know what I'm going to talk about this Feedback Friday. Right? Zelda? Thank you. Okay, so now that I don't have a cat's tail and butt in my nose, I'm going to wing this and see where it goes because I'm being pulled a bunch of different places. This has been a surreal week. I've been super busy, for one, getting ready for the workshop on Sunday. I think it's going to be great. I'm happy with the presentation. It's going to be a good time. So hopefully you'll join us on Sunday. It's deliberately a smaller group this time just because, bodies and facilitators and so on and so forth. So, hope to see you there. Let's do the help support this channel, and we'll see where it goes because I don't know. The patrons this week got my thoughts on Across the Spider-Verse and The Flash. So as promised, I'm doing stuff that I want to talk about without people freaking going bananas. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. Okay, so let's begin with the whole submersible thing and me sort of following that, because it turns out that at least one of the people on it was a friend of Richard Garriott DeCayu, creator of Ultima, Lord British, and a heck of a good guy. And, you know, it's the juxtaposition of knowing he's a good guy and seeing people mocking the death of his friend because, you know, his friend happened to be a billionaire who did something very risky. And you can say they chose to be there. That's fair. But being gleeful that someone lost their lives, not hurting anybody else, I understand it. I understand the class warfare is all over the place, and regular people don't see rich people as people. I guess I'm a bit more sympathetic because people don't see TV personalities or game journalists or YouTubers as real people either. Now, if I had the money that billionaires do, it probably wouldn't bother me. Doesn't really bother me much anymore anyway. But, you know, I spend 3 days plus a week working, in some cases, with people who are still working through the after effects of being, you know, socially abused, aka bullying as kids. And I just can't, you know, experiencing the damage it causes, especially in men. I just can't be okay with it with anybody. If somebody says something dumb, it's okay to call them on saying something dumb. But being happy someone's dead just because they're rich and decided to do something dangerous, I don't know. Like I said, I understand the urge. I don't share it, and it makes me kind of sad for humanity that we find all these reasons to dehumanize each other. And on that note, I want to remind people again that not just this is a trans-friendly channel, but when I refer to another person's YouTube channel and they thank me in the comments, and a commenter attacks them directly, that insults not only them, it insults me. I find it distasteful. I find it dishonorable, and it pisses me off. And if I tell somebody to stop doing something in the comments, it is not a negotiation. It's my channel. I have the final call. And I know this isn't everybody. I'm saying it so nobody claims they don't know. I put a little thing in the about section of the channel, but most people don't deal with that. Like, don't look at that. But it should be common sense that if somebody comes here and I welcome them, you don't pounce on them over something involving their identity. You don't pounce on them for anything, quite frankly. I believe in being gracious to guests. And yes, there is a certain amount of expecting assholes to multiply on the internet. But I don't have to accept that. And I don't think when you are told to stop because your behavior is considered inappropriate and you don't, you lose the right to complain about anyone else. Because again, I will have the conflict. I will go, knock it off. A lot of people won't. They'll just cut people off. And I mean, based on how we have an absolute breakdown in language going on right now, like postmodernism has hit such a critical mass that words always had ish definitions. Words have always been particular grunts, we agree, mean things. But it has just gotten so, and by postmodernism, I mean everything, not just the left. I am so sick of people couching emotional reasoning in some sort of logic. I much more respect people who just say, I don't get it, I don't understand it, and I admit it kind of scares me, than people spewing nonsense. And, so much of the stuff I see is so inherently contradictory that there's no point in even pointing out to the person when they went wrong, because if they cared, they wouldn't have spewed that crap in the first place. Now, here's what I think. I think, and I've said this before, I think in every movement, the most radical fringe creates easy counter arguments for the people who just want to scare people. And it works. I mean, there are so many people afraid to speak in case they're called all the things I get called. And I get it. I think, people say it's corporate policy and they're afraid of losing their jobs and all that stuff. But I think it's deeper than that. I think, and this is valid, and this is what I mean. We got to start talking about what it's about. I think people who have been bullied expect to get bullied because part of them is still in that place where people could just walk all over them and they couldn't do anything about it. And I get that. And I get if you've had some bad experiences with people who happen to be part of an identity group and they reminded you of that. I get that. I hope that people don't paint everybody in that identity group with the same brush. But again, emotions. Sometimes it happens. I was fortunate enough to come to the whole, become aware of trans people through actual trans people in real life. And, I remember the first time I heard that, online trans activists were fucking bonkers from a friend of mine who told me that they'd come after her. And so I wasn't surprised the first time they came after me. But, the rabid fringe of that is no different than the rabid fringe of, the Christians who tell me I'm going to hell. And I say the Christians because, again, it's not all Christians. It's a subset. And, I know people of my own religion who behave really badly and do shit. I don't have any love for Orthodox Jews that throw rocks at people on the Sabbath. Fuck off with that. But that's obviously, they don't speak for me. They don't throw rocks for me. There are those people that called me racist over a video game because I said you don't erase slavery with mind control, because mind control is a form of slavery. You don't erase slavery by manipulating time, because every time somebody does something you don't like, whoop, wipe out time. That's slavery. But that made me a racist. I've been a homophobe. I've been a transphobe. I've been a secret man. And so what? And that's the thing. It's easy for me to say, so what? It's privileged for me to say, so what? It's not a so what for people whose, trauma triggers are tripped by people coming at them that way. And that's the thing. Behavior matters. Intents matter and behavior matters. They have to for everybody, because it has to be the same rules for everyone. And so if you don't want, people coming after people who look like you because of something you didn't do, don't do it to other people. And I say this, God, it's Billionaire Hunger Games week, isn't it? Because, in the same week that the submersible thing happened and all the news media in the world descended on poor Newfoundland. Oh, God. Suddenly, we're about more than forest fires and legal weed. But Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling both decided to say that something about the word cisgender. Elon Musk said it was a slur. J.K. Rowling said, I don't have to speak like your gender as the unfalsifiable gender identity claim. No. J.K. Rowling has been on Skeptic YouTube, folks. Pray for humanity. Oh, fuck. I don't know who I feel more sorry for. I feel more sorry for Skeptic YouTube because, oh, God. Hold on to your fedoras, boys. They're probably more trilby hats. That was a joke. Take a joke. Holy shit. But this idea, we had that whole situation in Oakville up here. And people freaked out and protested the schools, and it became this whole culture war flashpoint. And what ended up happening is, for people who don't know, there was a teacher in Oakville at a high school, a shop teacher, that was claiming, I will say he, because the claim was refuted, that claimed to be a trans woman who had these giant, prosthetic breasts and just dressed in like pink spandex and all this stuff. And the school needed to go through the process. It needed to be done properly. And people were screaming and yelling and demanding immediately, like the whole idea of due process and trust but verify went out the window, as it always does. People want immediate blood, and that's not the way it works. So, the school opened an investigation. And people freaked out and protested the school and called everybody who were like, let the process work, leave kids alone, all that shit. And the New York Post ended up, the claim was made by the teacher that he had to wear the giant fake boobs because otherwise he had gender dysphoria. Now, that's a very specific claim. And that would not be the same, because that way, allegedly, they couldn't stop him from doing it, right? Except he got caught out without the prosthetics, meaning he lied. Because if it really did trigger gender dysphoria, if he had to wear those in class, in school, because of dysphoria, he wouldn't be out shopping without them. Now, not all trans people have that experience. I want to be clear. This is not the standard for all trans people. This was the standard for this person. And it was proven false. And so the teacher is no longer at that school. The system works. And so to assert that these claims aren't falsifiable, well, I just falsified it. We don't have self-ID in Canada. But people don't have to pay to get diagnosed. And thanks to the revisions in the DSM-5, we have a standard right now. And whether you agree with that or not, what J.K. Rowling said just isn't true. There are ways to meet a threshold to satisfy professionals that your gender dysphoria is real and medical transition is the best course of action. Now, I take intense exception with what she said about unproven claims, unfalsifiable claims. And it's interesting how many people, other people with disabilities I speak to who see this whole thing through personal experience. And, because I know some people who are trans skeptic who say, I have to prove that I'm disabled every, set number of years. Why don't they? And, okay, the thing is, if you're being prescribed hormones, the U.S. medical system is a mess. Let's set that aside. But up here You have to be prescribed hormones, which means you have to go to a doctor and you do have to be under medical supervision. You do. But I come at it from the other way because I have a rare autoimmune disease. It's called mixed connective tissue disease. And a lot of people don't believe it's real. There is a test for a particular marker, but, you know, it's like a tiny elevation and you can't, it's a collection of symptoms plus this marker, okay, you have this disease. And the treatment for it happens to be hydroxychloroquine, which is one of the drugs that was so demonized by the whole COVID thing that everybody's referring to it as Plaquenil now, even when you get the generic. They say Plaquenil to take down the stigma. Like, it's a double whammy. I've got a disease that a lot of people are like, that's not real, it's all in your head, you're just depressed. See, the problem is I got misdiagnosed with all this stuff before, because they have to, we got to go through all these things and we have to make sure it's not this, and we have to make sure it's not this, and you get screened for cancer 6 fucking times. That's real fun. And then finally, all right, there's this teeny tiny marker on a blood test that's elevated. Oh, gee, 5 years. 5 years it took to get this fucking diagnosis. 5 years of poor quality of life. Because people don't believe it's real. People believe it's in your head. And, finally I have, it's not what they were before I got ill, but I have much better function in my hands, and I ran out. I couldn't get a refill for 3 days a while back, and the pain started coming back, and it was scary. But when people just go, it's not real, you're mentally ill, it's not real. I think of my own experience, and I think of how upsetting it is. And people say, oh yeah, but in your case, it actually is real. They're wrong. And it took a while for, because for whatever reason, autoimmune diseases tend to hit women more than men. It's, oh no, you're just hysterical. You're just weak. You have a low pain tolerance. I'm the opposite. I have a ridiculously high pain tolerance. A big part of my problem. But, the things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, these are all diseases people said at one time were just hysterical, all in their head. And they could prove it with science there, right? And that's the thing that people get wrong about this falsifiability thing. The falsifiability standard isn't that we can't disprove it now. It's that because there's a lot of scientific theories. Anything with, relativity or quantum mechanics, a lot of these theories, if they must be falsifiable, out the window, none of them matter, right? The idea is they could be, there's a potential to falsify them in future. And trans people have existed as long as there have been people. The first C-section in the British Empire was successful one, the one where the mother lived, was performed by a trans man that some people will not credit as a trans man, even though you see the writings, referred to himself as a man, thought of himself as a man. There are going way back through history. In, ancient times, intersex people and trans people were given, positions in religious rights. Because, well, then they're like, well, God does everything, or the gods do everything. There's the whole hermaphrodite term for intersex people, Hermes and Aphrodite. There's a reason the names go back that far. There was a whole story about how that happened. And that's when people go, oh, that's a birth defect. You just called a human being's existence a birth defect. And we need to be real careful when we start getting to language of what is a defect versus what is just a difference. And here's my challenge for everybody here. We talk about distinctions without a difference. I want people to start thinking about differences without distinctions. I reject the idea that, I reject the idea that sex segregated toilets are done for safety reasons. Because, the newer places in the Toronto area tend to build single stall things because it's more efficient all around. But, sex segregated bathrooms happen because the public bathrooms were only for men. And back then, women couldn't vote, women couldn't own property. There was a historic building I used to go to events at. And the joke was that, the men's bathroom was up near the front. The ladies' room was all the way at the back because it was the previous servants' facilities, because it was a club where women weren't admitted at one point. This is the origin of all this shit we're fighting about. And when you know that, it seems absurd. So I want you to start thinking not just about distinctions without a difference, but differences without a distinction. It's not fair. Like I said, collective, everything. Most men, the idea of harming a woman is abhorrent. And this is before we get into the fact that trans women aren't men. Trans men are. But most men find the idea horrific that they would hurt a woman. And they shouldn't be punished and they shouldn't be, treated as preemptively dangerous because of the minority of men that are just fine with hurting women, make excuses. In a just world, we would separate the bad men from the good men. That is a difference and a distinction. And we would recognize that the whole idea of sex segregated bathrooms, like heteronormative shit like that, it's all about people not wanting to fart around someone, you might have a crush on. It's all about the feminine mystique and all that shit. It has nothing to do with safety. And you can scream and yell all you want. It doesn't. That is historical fact. The reason public bathrooms have those flimsy little stalls is because it was men only back in the day, and they wanted to prevent two things: sex and drug use. Yep. Sex and drug use. That's the reason public bathrooms are that way. That's why you can see on the bottom of the stall. These are facts. And then people start screaming at me about gametes and chromosomes. And it's like, just stop. Just stop. Are you listening to yourself? We don't test for these things on babies. We don't. You start going on about that and insisting that the gender roles that were designed, you know, centuries before we knew gametes existed, it's just not possible. That's unscientific. So the minute people start going that, it's like, this isn't science, it's emotion. We've so demonized emotion and we have so created a pantomime out of emotion. I am terrified of men, says J.K. Rowling. And now all of a sudden it's a gender ideology that's not real. You can't have it both ways, woman. Either we're supposed to not question your fears, because remember, that was her original argument. She's an abused woman. She's afraid. Respect her fear. Now it's a gender ideology. It's not real. I don't have to affirm that. Well, why do we have to affirm her fear that some may think is irrational? But she doesn't have to affirm behavior in others that she thinks is irrational. It doesn't make sense. It's a double standard. But we do this when it's emotional. J.K. Rowling doesn't like trans people. I think they just remind her of a few too many things about herself. And a lot of trans people go through a profoundly transphobic phase. They enforce gender norms really intensely before they transition because they're fighting within themselves. I'm not saying she's trans. I'm just saying facts are facts. But the rest of us don't have to do that, you know? And I say this as I came from, I was taught in university that gender is totally a social construct. It's not real. But then I was presented with facts that showed, no, it is very real. I accepted those facts. And if the identity is real, if our understanding of that is real and it's in the mind, you're going to get a mismatch sometimes. I mean, I'm a kid who didn't see girl characters as the same as me. I didn't. They were treated differently than me. They were valued for different things than me. They were pretty and popular and feminine and graceful, and they were sweet and kind and people, and I was none of those things. I was the monster who was a decent person inside. Now, maybe if there were characters like that were female, I would have connected to those. But, it was Thundercats and Beast from X-Men for me. Skeletor was cool. He-Man was cool. Teela, all right. But I always thought, the woman always being placed in that whole thing of not knowing the superhero's secret identity bugged the fuck out of me as a kid. It doesn't bother me now. It bugged me as a kid. And so, I was one of those people that were like, well, no, you're just conforming to gender roles. You're just, part of the reason I do Two Women Talking is kind of as penance, because I was a real asshole about that when I was younger, because I was trying to self-validate by invalidating other people, and I was young and I was stupid and it was wrong. And I changed my mind when evidence was presented for me. And you can too. And one of the things that made me realize is if, at least here, maybe not in the world, but at least on this channel, if it is just, I don't understand it and it scares me because these people are so pushy, please just say that. Don't spew a bunch of stuff that just, because I can't validate something that's wrong. Your feelings are not wrong. Your feelings are not falsifiable. If you say you're afraid or angry or whatever, I will take you at your word. Why? Because it's just the most expedient thing. liars eventually out themselves because they get caught in too many lies. But it costs me nothing. If you're a person with healthy boundaries, it costs you nothing to take somebody at their word about the fact that they're scared or the fact that they're angry or, it's the difference between the people who are like, She-Hulk hates men, the people who go, wow, I felt really attacked by that show. Because the latter isn't deliberate. And I really think the language, this whole thing, would become much more solutions driven if everybody could just make that one pivot. Because I'm tired of fighting about bathrooms and elementary school sports. I'm so tired of people treating girls as inherently weak and unequal. When people are screaming at me about kids' sports, when I played co-ed kids' sports up until middle school, and the girls were taller than the boys in grade 7 basketball. We mopped the floor with those fuckers. I know you're wrong. You're not going to persuade me. I've seen it. Facts are facts. And I think that's a reasonable standard. That's falsifiability. Well, I've seen that it's not true. Therefore, we don't have to do this. We don't. There's a better way. And I know the people I collaborate with. And I believe they are good people. And I take it personally when they are attacked, when people are aggressive towards them because they come on my channel. We're not doing that. Thanks. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. Workshop Sunday, link in the description box below. Thanks for watching, and if you don't join us, have a great weekend.